Okay. So today we'll see in detail the branch and bound algorithm, which is the standard approach to solve an integer program. So we have seen so far that why the simplex method of LP doesn't work here, and what is needed in order to find the optimal integer solution. So you have to have a mechanism to go inside the feasible region in order to search for an integer point, right? Now we will see the example with this problem, right, where maximize this function is given subject to these constraints. Two constraints are there, right, where x1 and x2 are non-negative integers. Now if we solve it as an LP, so which is we know which we call as linear relaxation of the problem, right? So if we solve the linear relaxation, then we find the value of x1 is 3.75 and x2 is 1.25 and z is 23.75, right? Now interestingly, you see that this value of z, which is 23.75, although it is not the optimal solution, even it is not a feasible solution, right? This x1 x2 combination is not even a feasible solution for the integer program, right? However, this z value 23.75 gives an upper bound to the IP, isn't it? Why it is giving the upper bound? This is a maximization problem, right? This is maximization problem and it is giving the upper bound to the IP. Why? Which means
Because
that the optimal solution, the actual optimal solution of the integer program cannot be greater than this. That is the meaning of upper bound, right? Yes, because
Because it is the
yeah, okay, you tell.
because this is the solution of the LP and this is the point which gives the maximum value in the entire feasible region.
correct.
So
Correct. So if I look at the graph, say here we got this solution z equal to 23, say, right, as a solution of LP, which is but suppose I have integer points inside it, right? Inside it, some integer points are there, right? Now, whatever is inside or whatever maybe even lying on the lines, the constraint boundaries, they are all inferior compared to this point, this corner point, right? So we know that the feasible integer solution as well as the optimal one will lie either inside or maybe on the constraint boundaries, right? But all of them are anyway inferior to this LP solution because we are maximizing, so this maximum value is giving 23.75, right? So that is why we are saying that it actually gives you an upper bound to the IP, to the integer programming problem, right? So now we see that why this branch and bound algorithm, the bound concept is there. Now we are able to define the upper bound. Okay. Similarly, we will be able to define the lower bound also. Later we will see. So now the approach, as we have seen yesterday, is to branch. That means if you try to divide into subproblems in the hope that when you solve the subproblem, you will find an integer solution as the optimal one for the subproblem, right? So the procedure to do that is to choose one fractional variable, one continuous variable, and branch on it. So here, for example, we have chosen, say, x1. So now if you look at this graph, here, so here I have chosen x1. So so x1 is called the branching variable because we are branching on x1. How to branch? You write two constraints so that all the fractional values in between this range can be eliminated, right? So because x1 is 3.75, so I can write x1 less than equal to 3 and x1 greater than equal to 4. So if we add these two constraints to the system, I get these two subproblems, right? Let us call it LP2 and LP3. The original one was LP1. Okay. Now these two subproblems are created, LP2 and LP3. Now they are also now, we will solve each of these subproblems again as a linear programming problem, right? Because we do not know how to solve integer programming. So essentially you see the branch and bound method solves multiple linear programming problems and employ some branching and bounding technique in order to find the integer. So as such, this method utilizes the simplex method, right? The branch and bound method utilizes simplex method and solves solutions of LPs in order to find the integer solution. So that is very important. So now, okay, LP2 and LP3 are created. Now we try to solve LP2. So what is LP2? If I want to write LP2, what would be the objective and the constraints? Objective will be the same. And what about the constraints? All the original constraints of the integer program plus x1 less than equal to 3. That defines LP2. Correct? And you solve it by simplex. So you see here. So this is how we define LP2. So this is LP1 plus x1 less than equal to 3 and LP3. So that means all the objective and constraints plus new constraints getting added. Okay. Now when you solve this LP2, here you can solve graphically because it can be plotted in a graph. But for other higher dimensional problems, you have to solve by simplex. Now when you solve it, you get this solution: 3, 2, x1 is 3, x2 is 2 and z is 23. Now what is happening here? See.
Sir,
so what is actually,
sir,
yeah, tell me.
Sir, are you on first slide? Because we are seeing just a branch and bound, no LP2 or anything.
Oh, you are not able to see the slide?
Yeah, I'm just able to see the first slide, branch and bound algorithm.
Oh, not the graph.
No, sir, we are
No.
able to see, sir.
I think something is problematic from his side. Like he can just leave the meeting and rejoin. It will get reset.
Yeah, please. Please you rejoin, huh? All the other people are able to see. Okay, so now continue. So when you solve this LPT, you get this point, which is 3, 2. You can see in the graph also. Right. Now what is interesting here, and Z value is 23 you are getting for this point. Now this 3, 2, you see that x1 and x2 both are integers. So that means this 3, 2 is definitely an integer feasible point to the original IP. But we cannot call it optimal as of yet for the original problem. But certainly it is optimal for this subproblem, LP2. Do you agree with me or not?
Yes, sir.
So this is a feasible, integer feasible point. And of course optimal for LP2. Right? So we get Z equal to here 23. Now when you have this situation, then we call it pruning of a node. That means you do not divide the problem space further. You do not divide LP2. There is no need, because you know that this is the best integer point among all the integer points that are contained inside, right? So even if you go inside, you will not find anything better. So that means this LP2 is now solved, and because it gives integer feasibility, that is the integer feasible solution, it is pruned. That means it will not be explored further. This is called pruning of a node. Right, pruning of a node. Here LP2, right? So this is one condition by which you can prune a node, that the moment you find integer feasibility, you can prune it. Okay. Now, what does it give? Z equal to 23. So what can we say about this value 23? Is it an upper bound or lower bound to the original IP?
Lower bound.
Lower bound, right? So this gives the lower bound. Why lower bound? Lower bound? Because we have found a feasible solution. So of course, optimal can be better than this, but definitely optimal solution cannot be lower than this. It's a mixed maximization problem. So the optimal solution, either it will be this or better than this, right? That means the higher value of Z. So it gives you lower bound. So whenever you find integer feasibility, you prune the node and you report the lower bound, right? If you already have an existing lower bound from other sub problems, you compare the lower bounds and choose the one having the higher value, right? Okay. Can you update the lower bound? Okay, now so this is LP2 is, so initially the tree we started with LP1, we divided it into two, LP2 and LP3 based on the branching variable x1, right? LP2 is pruned, so we don't explore it further. Now what about LP3? So when you solve the LP3, you will get this point as the optimal solution, this one, right? And what is this solution? What is the value? The value which is reported here, you see, it is this x1 equal to 4, x2 is 0.83 and z is 23.33. So this is the point, 4.83 and 23.33. So it means it gives a fractional solution, right? So what is the rule for when you get a fractional solution? That means it is not integer feasible, right? So which means that again you have to apply the same method. You have to divide the, you have to branch on the fractional variable and again create two sub problems, right? However, we see that what is the current upper bound? The current upper bound is given by LP1, right, which is 23.75. And what is the current lower bound is given by this one, LP2, which is 23. So which means the upper bound is 23.75 and lower bound is 23. What does it mean? The optimal solution will lie in between this. You have an upper bound, you have a lower bound. So on the optimal solution of the original IP. So which means it will lie in between this, or it will be either this or that, right? Now for this LP3, what value you are getting, Z, is 23.33 for the fractional solution. Okay. So now if you go inside, that means if you divide the subspace based on x2, branching variable x2, I mean, will you get a better lower bound or a better See, upper bound anyway you are not getting from here. A better upper bound you are not getting because 23.75 is higher than 23.33. But this is not giving the upper bound of the original problem because this is a sub problem LP3. Okay, so current lower bound is 23. So even if you get some integer solution by dividing it into sub problems, right? Will you get anything better than this 23.33?
No.
No, it will be less than 23.33, the value, right? Already I have LB 23. So the only possibility, I mean, the only inspiration from which I can divide this subspace is if there is a possibility of finding an integer solution which is between this 23 and 23.33. Let me say, for example, 23.15. If it gives that kind of value, then only there is a sense of exploring this LP3, right? But is that possible or not?
Sir,
You see the objective function.
in the objective
What is-
function, all the coefficients are integers.
Integers.
So the objective value should be also an integer.
Yes.
So if the value is between 23.75 and 23, then it should be 23 only.
Yes, it should be 23. Between so basically I want to find, I mean it makes sense to it will make sense to explore LP3 if there is a chance of finding an integer solution for which the z value will lie between 23 and 23.33, right? So there is some chance of improving the lower bound, isn't it? But it is not possible. The best thing that you can get is 23 because fractional you will, so this happens because of this objective function for this problem. But suppose if you had fractional coefficients in the objective function, for example say 0.15 x1 plus 0.34 x2, this type of, then you might have to explore LP3, right? But now looking at the objective function, we can declare that there is no need to explore LP3. So it is pruned by bound. This is called pruning by bound. So earlier we have seen we have pruned LP2 by integer feasibility. So this is another case where we are pruning by bound or pruning or fathoming. It is also known as fathoming of nodes, right? So this node is fathomed by bound. Okay. Another case by which you can fathom a node is by infeasibility. Suppose you get a subproblem which is infeasible. Okay, that means there is no feasible point. So then that node, that LP is automatically pruned, automatically fathomed by infeasibility. So there are three cases. One is fathoming by integer feasibility. Second one is fathoming by bound, right? And the third one is fathoming by infeasibility. So now you see when you look at the branch and bound tree, so this is the branch and bound tree. So here from here we get this z 23.75 is the upper bound, right? And then we branched on x1, right? And got this. So here x1 less than equal to 3 and here x1 greater than equal to 4. We got LP2 and LP3. We solved LP2. We got this integer feasibility. So this node is not explored anymore. And we have this lower bound from here, right? This is the lower bound. Then we come to LP3 and we see, this. So this is fathomed by bound. Okay. So then the entire tree is explored. There is no remaining node to be explored, right? All nodes are fathomed. So we declare the incumbent, that is the current integer feasible solution, which is the current incumbent, as the optimal. So optimal is given by this 0.32, right? So this is the optimum. 32 is that integer feasible solution and Z is 23. Did you get the entire procedure or not?
Yes, sir.
Now you could have also branched on x2. Here I have branched on x1. I have chosen x1 as the branching variable. You can choose x2 as branching also. So for example, here in LP1 you have x2 is 1.25. So if you would have to branch on x2, what constraint would you require to add?
x2
is less than equal to 1?
1,
Yes.
x2 greater than equal to 2.
Greater than equal to 2. So then you would have got two different LPs. But the final optimal solution would have been the same. Only the tree would have been the different, the nodes would have been the different, but the final thing would be the same. Okay. Similarly, you can also choose to explore the right node first and then the left node, right? So for example, LP1 and you got this LP2 and LP3, then you first solve LP3 and then you come back to the LP2, right? Here I have chosen left first and then right, right? You can choose right first and then left. You can choose breadth first versus depth first. So for example, you choose LP1, solve LP1, then LP2, then LP3, and then you explore LP2. So in this way you can go, or you can go depth first, like LP1, then LP2, and then you further divide it. Okay, and then you come back after completely exploring LP2, you come back to LP3, right? So in any manner you can search this tree. Okay, but there is no rule as such, if I mean, you will observe that if you adopt a different rule, your computational time may increase or decrease, but nobody can predict whether it will increase or decrease. So I'll just give you an example of this. Say this one. So this is another branch and boundary for the same problem which we are considering. But here we have decided to solve LP3 first and then LP2. And it's a depth first search. So depth first search plus right node first and then left. So this is the procedure we have adopted here. And see the number of nodes have increased. So computational time of course will increase, right? But finally we'll get the same solution. So what is happening here? So you carefully observe this tree and I'll ask someone to explain it. So if you have understood the earlier tree and that how you create those LPs and how you divide the LPs based on the branching variable, how you fathom the nodes using integer feasibility and bounding and infeasibility, right? And how you update the lower bound, how you update the upper bound, and when do you converge? That means when do you declare that optimal solution is reached? So if you have any question, you ask and you try to understand this tree with this strategy that the right node first and then left, and it's a depth first search. So you explain how this is being done. Anybody who would be able to explain how this thing is going on, how this tree is being built? If you have any question from the earlier tree, this one I can show you. You can ask first. Is this clear? Is this tree clear? How we have obtained this tree?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now can you explain this tree?
So should I
Yeah.
okay. So like since we are doing depth first search and that too we are starting from right node. So first it will explore the x1 greater than equal to 4 constant. Then it will go to that LP3 node and then since we are doing depth first search, it will continue. So then it will pick up x2 greater than equal to 1 constant and it will go there. And it sees that no feasible solution, then it will come back to LP3 and next it will go to the left node by following the constant x2 less than equal to 0 and it will get a value. So but that is still infeasible. So again it will branch on x1 greater than equal to 5 and it will go to LP7. That is, and there is no feasible solution there, so it will come back to LP4 and then it will go to LP6. So there it will get a solution, but that is just a lower bound. Z is equal to 20 and then it will come back and it will come back to LP4, then it will come back to LP3, then it will come back to LP1 and then LP1 will now go to LP2 by following the constant x1 less than equal to 3 and there it will find the new lower bound which will be the optimum.
Right. So you see, by just changing the strategy, how much extra effort you have to put, right? Because at every node you are solving an LP by simplex method, right? Here you are solving graphically, you may solve graphically, but for higher, other problems you might have to employ simplex at every node, right? So each node of the branch and bound tree, you are solving an LP problem, right? And so when you come to LP3, you see this fractional, right? So again, you choose the fractional variable x2 and then branch on it. So this LP5 is fathomed by infeasibility. Then you come here, right? Again, you have got fractional solution, right? So again, you branch on the fractional variable x1. So LP7 again by infeasibility, and then LP6 you got the first integer feasible solution, right? So you fathom this node by integer feasibility and you update your lower bound. So this is the lower bound for the problem now, correct? Then you go back to LP2 and you again find an integer feasible solution and you fathom this node, right? But then you have got another lower bound. Now you have to compare this lower bound with this current lower bound, 20 and 23. Now this is higher, and for maximization problem we want to increase the value of z. So this is a better solution. So better lower bound. So you update. So this is the new lower bound. Now you see that all nodes are fathomed, right? All the leaf nodes, they are fathomed. So you declare that this is the optimal solution. Again, you see the same solution, 3, 2 and 23. So you get the same solution, right? Now, can you tell me, suppose from LP3, when you are coming to LP4, by adding this constraint, okay, leave it, say for example, from node 4 to node 6, when you are coming. So LP4 you have already solved. You got this solution, so you have a corresponding simplex table, associate a final simplex table, right, for LP4, and then you are adding this x1 less than equal to 4 to get LP6. So what will be your approach to solve this LP6? Will you run the simplex all over again, or you already know how to do it?
We can take the solution from LP4 and use dual simplex to restore feasibility, add a new constraint and restore feasibility.
Yes, so you already know how to add a new constraint to a system, right? So you can utilize that. So although branch and bound method, it has LPs at all these nodes, but not every time you have to solve from scratch. You can use your knowledge from sensitivity analysis, how to add constraint, remove constraint, add variable, remove variable, and things like that, right? To get to the optimal solution for that node very quickly. Okay. So here we are, so the branch and bound algorithm is now covered. So is there any question so far on this branch and bound algorithm?
No, sir.
Okay.
Sir, can you please explain again how we change, when do we change the upper bound? Initially, we get the upper bound from the main LP problem, but how does it change during the?
It doesn't change. It doesn't change because see at this LP1 only you get an upper bound, because in LP1 you are considering all the original constraints, right? And the original objective. So this 23.75 is the upper bound that you get. But the other sub problems, when you are considering, you are either dropping some constraints, okay, or adding some new constraints, right? For example, x1 greater than equal to adding a new. So these are not original problems anymore. These are not relaxations of the original problems, right? So the LP solution that you are getting from here, you cannot call it the upper bound of the original problem. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
So upper bound doesn't change, only you update the lower bound. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now, this is a very important question, because you see, so when you get a very good upper bound, which is close to the optimal solution. For example, here you get a very good upper bound, right? 23.75, and you know the optimal solution is 23. So see, it's very close to the optimal. So this is a very good upper bound. And in those cases, you can expect the branch and bound tree would be small. That means the small number of nodes would get explored, and you can easily find the optimal solution. But for a problem, if the gap is very high, so suppose after solving LP1 you get Z is say 50, whether the optimal solution is 23, right? Z is 23, so there is a lot of gap. So in those cases, you might have to explore more number of nodes. So focus is always there, to get a very good upper bound. So this can be done in two ways. One is by writing the problem very tightly. Now these are different modeling strategies, and a lot of mathematical interpretations are involved. But actually, you can you can write a constraint very tightly. That means modeling the constraints in a very effective way, so that upon linear relaxation it give you reasonably close upper bound. Okay, this is one way. So when you are writing the constraints properly, mathematically effectively, and there are different methods or strategies by which you can identify that whether your formulation is tight or loose. But we will not go to those details because those are advanced topics. But so this is one way, that you write a tight formulation so that you get a good linear relaxation, good upper bound. Other way is that you design a very good heuristic. Suppose for the traveling salesman problem, you have a very good genetic algorithm, which gives you very close, a solution which is very close to the optimal. And then you treat that as an upper bound, that solution as an upper bound, because optimal. So then what will be done? You can reject some of these, these LPs in the branch and bound tree by bound. You don't have. So for example, see, by solving LP1, suppose if I would have got 50 here. Suppose this is not 23.75, say this is 50. However, from a heuristic, I have got a solution which has a z value is say 24, say. Okay. So then I will not use this Z50, this solution as my upper bound. I'll rather use this heuristic solution as my upper bound, so that I can reject some of the LPs, prune some of the LPs in the branch and boundary by bound. I mean, if I start with 50, then of course, you know, some more LPs I have to uncover because I have very bad upper bound. But if the upper bound, so that is where the heuristics and the approximation algorithms come into play, and they actually contribute significantly in enhancing the performance of branch and bound method in some of the problems, especially the difficult problems. Okay. Okay, now I have asked you to read about the assignment problem and tell me what is the Hungarian algorithm. Who has read it? So if I go back to this assignment problem, right? This one is the assignment problem. So have you read about the Hungarian algorithm, like a simple way, a simple algorithm to solve for an assignment problem? Have you read it or not?
No, sir.
Why not?
Forgot.
So you take any book, this Taha, Hamdi Taha, Introduction to Operations Research, or these Hillier and Lieberman, you will find a chapter or a topic called assignment problem, right? So there they will discuss this formulation as well as the Hungarian algorithm. So tomorrow I want one of you to present it to me, that how Hungarian algorithm works. Everyone please prepare. I'll randomly pick one of you to present it. How does it work? Okay?
Okay, sir.
Okay. There was some concern about the assignment. Someone was posting, what is the problem in assignment?
Oh, no, it was resolved. I only asked actually.
Okay, okay.
The English wasn't fine, like proper, so I got confused. So I asked my friends, so they explained it.
Okay.